I was going to say, Christian, I wanted to say congratulations on two counts, first of all. Firstly, obviously, for the Super Hoops triumph the other day at Wembley. Also, for having the guts to stand up and run and raise and discuss a lot of these incredibly important issues for London that we're talking about today. So, good on you. I want to start by saying when I first I've been writing about the property market for the Evening Standard for about 15 years or so. When I first started in the 90s, it was very easy to write stories about the property market. Basically, rising prices good, falling prices bad, and that was the tenor of all our stories about the market. But how my world has changed. Owner-occupiers are now in the minority, and London is awash with thwarted buyers stuck in what many of them see as the ghetto of the private rented sector. If I even hint in stories now that the latest huge surge in prices is a good thing, I get trolled on Twitter and hate mails from people who tell me that it's actually the worst possible thing in their lives. Endlessly rising property values are no longer seen as a positive sign of a healthy market, but the symptom of a sector that has fundamentally failed. So the people who make London function and as the great city that we know it is, cannot afford to own the roof over their heads. And that's not just the reaction from frustrated renters who've been priced off the ladder altogether. Those who have somehow scrambled onto the bottom rung feel that they are stuck now. Every hike in prices just widens the gap between their tiny starter flats and the 3-bedroom or 4-bed homes that they would like to move into to start raising a family in. Rising property prices are just as much a trap for them as they are for those still in the PRS. So the broad consensus now is that while no one wants another property crash and all the agony that comes with that, with negative equity and so on, prices rising at 17% a year, as they have been in the past 12 months, is bad. It's bad for young Londoners and could well end in tears again in a few years' time. First Mark Carney and now even George Osborne seem to have come to the view that an out-of-control market, and that's what it's been feeling like at times in recent years, poses a threat to economic recovery. But if that's the consensus, you would think it would be easy to do something about it. Far from it. Among our readers, we pick up a very palpable sense, and anger even, that there's too much hot foreign money coming into the capital, and that's helping to supercharge demand and stoke up prices. Equally, there's a very strong feeling that house building for ordinary people, rather than rich buy-to-leave investors, desperately needs to be boosted to increase the supply side of the equation. But what should be done about these twin problems, overheated demand and lacklustre supply? It does seem that foreign investment actually at the moment is starting to cool down as the pound strengthens in anticipation of higher interest rates later in the year. And that should take some of the sting out of the market and lead to lower rises. But what seems to incense our readers more than anything else, and I get so much feedback about this from readers, is the sight of homes that have been bought and then left empty with the lights off all over London. And I think now we are starting to see signs of a policy backlash against that. Islington, Camden, I think Hammersmith and Fulham since the last local elections, and Ed Miliband and the Mayor are now starting to make noises about empty homes, the owners of empty homes being penalised through higher rates of council tax or even fines. And that does seem to me a sensible route to go down. As ever, the devil is in the detail, and defining exactly what constitutes an empty home and then how that definition should be policed is not going to be easy. Is a furnished London home brought by a foreign business executive but used for only 5 or 6 weeks a year, is that empty or is it not? Those sorts of issues, those sorts of detail are going to have to be addressed before a serious attempt at introducing an empty homes tax is made, but I think that would be a useful move. I think the mansion tax that Labour and the Liberal Democrat leadership have been talking about in quite vague terms also looks difficult. Who carries out the valuation? What's the appeal system? Personally, I think it feels like a surveyors and lawyers fees bonanza in the making. And I would favour, as a lot of sensible commentators, an overhaul of the council tax system, long overdue, as the best mechanism for making London's wealthiest residents and non-residents pay a fairer contribution towards the public services and infrastructure that they benefit from. On the supply side, there does now seem to be the first signs of green shoots of a solid rise in house building in London. We haven't seen that yet in the official figures for starts, which are still stuck in that 15 to 20,000 a year band where they've been for most of the past 30 years as the backlog of unmet demand has grown and grown. But advanced registration suggests that pipeline is rapidly filling up now, and we will start to see annual totals well into the 20,000s over the next few years. And that's an improvement, but still well below the 42,000 that Boris Johnson says we need to house London's growing population, and a mile away from the 50 to 60,000 suggested by some others, such as the business group London First. Two things strike me about this new housing boom. First, how many of the new homes we're getting are built in towers, many along the river, that we may yet live to regret when we see these great clusters of skyscrapers on the skyline in a decade's time? Are we just repeating the mistakes of the past, but replacing municipal tower blocks with luxury skyscrapers and come to regret them in just the same way? And how little of it is genuinely affordable housing? Under Ken, the target was 50%. And I've seen that in the time that I've been reporting property, that seems to have come down and down and down and down. And now typically developments are 20% and below affordable in many cases, or nothing, and in many cases zero. And with a sort of Section 106 contribution as a get-out. And that seems incredible that that's been allowed to become the new normal at a time of extraordinary chronic housing shortages. I've often thought, and I'm sure there are experts more qualified than me to give the reasons for this, but I've often thought it's a shame we're not building more shared ownership housing in the capital. I find when I speak to people who have been lucky to go down this route, and it's open to only a very few, I've been struck by how well it works for them. They get that sense of participation in London's growing wealth that comes with owner occupation, but without feeling stretched beyond their financial comfort zones by taking on vast mortgage commitments. And I think any policy that would boost the supply of shared ownership would be welcomed by the Evening Standard. I'm also increasingly persuaded, against all my instincts as a boy from the countryside, that the Greenbelt's sacrosanct status will have to be reassessed. Even if all the brownfield sites in London are unlocked by the Chancellor's and the Mayor's hard hat loving that we saw this week, that will still not release enough development land to cope with the extra 100,000 people a year coming to live in London. And I appreciate that hacking into the Greenbelt has about as much political appeal as privatising the NHS, but we may not have a choice as Londoners. And some of the outer boroughs in particular, sitting on thousands of hectares of protected Greenbelt land that arguably contributing far more to London's housing crisis than the rich Chinese investors are often the easy target. Developers often talk to me, deeply off the record, it has to be said, of what they describe as the nightmare of dealing with planning authorities in some of the leafier corners of London, particularly in the southwest quadrant. And obviously no one wants to build on valued parkland or other public open spaces, but I think there is a sense, and perhaps unfairly, that the good burghers of places like Richmond, Kingston and Sutton sometimes have pulled up the drawbridge and want nothing more to do with London's huddled masses. The next mayor will also certainly need enhanced powers to take control of housing at supply at a pan-London level, and I was very interested to hear Christian's thoughts on that. Christian, you and I first met when we were both writing about transport 20-odd years ago, which was for so long London's greatest Achilles heel. Now, I don't think there's any question that it's housing, or rather the lack of it. And I'm certain that any candidate who can come up with genuinely imaginative ideas that will make finding decent, affordable, sustainable housing less of an impossible dream for young Londoners will deserve the support of the voters and the leader columns of the Evening Standard.